Okay. Hopefully we're live now. Can everyone hear me? Um, Please say something in the chat if you can hear me. Good. All right. So, hey Brian, can you just chime in and say something just so we know that we've got Discord audio?
Yeah, sure. Hello. Can everybody hear me?
Everybody hear Brian?
I wonder if those yeses are for the first
Yeah,
part.
that's a good question. Okay. Yeah, they say they can hear you. Okay, so that's good. Um, yeah. So. Um, we're doing a stream on the Royal Game of Ur. Uh, so this is kind of an interesting project and kind of tough. And what we're hoping to do tonight is we're hoping that we can kind of take care of a bunch of questions that maybe everyone has, um, and kind of just answer them in mass, so that maybe you can get started on your project and make a big dent in it, and maybe the office hours queue will get a little bit less backed up. That's the idea. So what we're going to do is we're just going to talk about the project for a while, and then we'll take some questions at the end. And just apologies in advance to people who have maybe gotten a nice headway on the project. We're going to kind of start just talking about some basic stuff. So you might be bored for just a little bit if you already kind of half know what you're doing, but that's fine. So let's go. Okay, so um, the first thing I'm going to talk about is what is none. So, hang on, why am I getting audio feedback? Hey Brian, are you dumping your audio into TA General?
I'm not dumping audio. Let me see if I can.
Because I was hearing myself echoing or something. That's weird. Now I'm not hearing myself, so that's odd. All right, okay, good. We'll let it go for now. So I'm going to talk about what is none, just to start with. And you've probably noticed that in the starter code, there are some variables that are initialized to none. And none is really just, in Python, it's an instance of none type. Basically, none is just nothing. So if I set a variable equal to none, the variable has no value. And if I would put it in a true-false statement, I'm going to get a result of false from that. So we could say it's truthy. So if I say, if I set a variable to none, and then I say if a variable, that'll evaluate to false. If I say if not a variable, it'll evaluate to true. So that's what none is. And you'll see in a bit why none is really useful for especially the piece class. So just to recap the files you need, there are just two Python files you're going to need to run the game and to submit the project. Those are, I think it's Royal Ur Starter, and Board Square is what's provided to you. You're going to need to rename Royal Ur Starter to Royal Game of Ur. By the way, is it Ur or is it Or? Do you know, Brian?
I've just been saying
Yeah.
It's
Yeah, I
just
don't
a
know.
video.
Somehow I think Eric says Or, but I'm not sure. I'm going to say Ur. Um, and then there are two JSON files. And what confused one person that I was helping, what was it, yesterday, was that, the JSON files end with .ur. And what's the deal with that? Well, that's just a file extension. They're JSON files. They just, have a weird name. They just work like JSON files because that's what they are.
Yeah, in generally in Linux environments, the extension doesn't mean anything.
Yeah, I mean, technically, even in a Windows environment, it doesn't mean anything. You can right-click it and say open with and open in another program, but we don't really need to get into that, I guess, technically.
Yeah.
But yeah, also on Mac's file extensions, it's kind of like Linux, I think. So, you only really need to submit the two Python files. You don't need to submit the boards, the game boards. We already have those. So,
Don't hard code them.
what?
Don't hard code the file names either.
Yeah, don't hardcode the file names. There are three classes that are provided to you. The one that you're probably going to see first if you look in the Royal Ur starter file is called class Royal Game of Ur. And you're not going to be creating Royal Game of Ur objects. We've already created one in the if name equals main section. You're just going to be working within that and putting functions inside of there to run the game. So it's just kind of like a managing class. It has some pre-written functions that Eric wrote, and you don't have to touch those functions either. You can just leave them as is. The really important function in here is called play game, and essentially that's where you play the game, and so you have to modify it and make it play a game of Royal Ur. And of course you're probably going to want to add some additional functions, and we haven't really told you what you need to add, but essentially you can divide the game into a bunch of steps that you repeat over and over, and you're probably going to want to make functions for those steps. So Eric says, a minimum of 4 functions, so you're going to be graded on that, of course. If you only have 3, you'll lose points. But you're probably going to write more than 4 functions. I was looking at the sample that Brian coded up. I don't know, how many did you put in? Was it 8, Brian?
I think it was either 7 or 8 functions in total that I wrote.
Yeah. I was working on my own solution. That I was doing a similar number of functions, but I never actually finished mine. So that's the Royal Game of Ur class. Then there's inside boardsquare.py, there are 2 classes. There's UrPiece and there's boardsquare. So the UrPiece class represents a single black or white stone for the game. So you're going to be creating UrPiece variables. So if each player has 7 stones, you'll have 7 UrPieces, for each player. And 7 is a magic number, but we have a constant in the Royal Game of Ur.py file called starting pieces, and it's set to 7. So you want to use that to decide how many UrPieces you make for each player. And just kind of a very, very non-vague hint. What's a good way to store a bunch of items that are very similar to each other in one place? That's probably the best way to store your UrPieces. So the board square is also in the same file, and it just represents a square on the board. There's 1 board square variable per square on the board. And if you were looking at the original Ur game board, there are like 20 squares on it. I think you can actually put a piece on every single one of them, but definitely most of them. And so that means there will be 20 board squares in your game board. And the game board's a 2D list, and we'll talk about that in a minute too. But by now you should know how to navigate a 2D list, so you shouldn't have too much trouble moving from one board square to another. And really, we don't care what the structure of the 2D list is. We don't even need to know, for the purposes of our program, how many board squares we have, because as it turns out, each board square is connected to the next board square. So all we need to know is where the entry point is. We can plop a piece on the entry point, and we can just move it 1 square at a time, until we get to the end of the board. So one of the functions Eric provided you is called loadBoard, and it's going to create a 2D list of board squares. And you're not going to have to create any board squares yourself. That's just automatically done for you. And this list is called self.board. Technically it's just called board, but I'm including self in here because you're going to be typing self.board each time that you're trying to access it inside the Royal Game of Ur class. So, just eliminates any confusion here. And each square knows where the next square is. If you're a black stone, or if you're a white stone, it knows that too. If you've looked in the boardsquare.py file, you'll notice that in the constructor for the board square class, there are a bunch of attributes that we create, and one of them is next_white, one of them is next_black, and those are pointers to the next board square object that you want to move to. It also knows if it's a rosette. We've got an attribute for that that's true or false, and you can see that in the constructor. I think by default it initializes it to false. And it also knows if it's an entry point for a black or white stone. That's also a value. It'll probably contain white, or black, depending on which it is. It also knows if it's an exit point. Same goes for that. And it knows if there's a piece on it.
And what piece it is.
Yes, and it knows what piece it is. And each Ur piece knows its color. But unfortunately, this is something you're going to have to add to the class in some form or other, because the piece doesn't know, in the big sense, what that color means. It just knows my color value is something. And you're going to have a black color and you're going to have a white color in your game, and you're going to set it as constants. But you're going to have to tell the piece somehow whether its color stands for white or whether its color stands for black. And you're going to need that because there's the can move function in the piece class, and it needs to know whether it's moving to the next white or next black square. And we'll talk about that in a bit. And each piece knows its location. It's going to be a board square. And if it's not on the board, it's going to be none. So this is what I was talking about a couple of minutes ago with none, why it can be so useful. Because if an piece is not on the board, you just set its location to none. Then we know it's not on the board. And you know if it's finished, we just set its location to none as well. There's also a finished attribute that you can set to true to indicate that the piece is finished. And if you kick somebody's piece off the board, well, you set that piece's location to none as well. So rolling dice is another important part, but it's also relatively simple because Eric wrote a roll d4 dice function, and it's just going to give you a number between 0 and 4 inclusive, and that tells you how far a piece can move potentially. So the rules of the game essentially consist of alternating turns between players, and a player's turn consists of, first you roll dice. If you roll 0, you can't do anything, so your turn just ends. So then once you roll your dice and you get a number from 1 to 4, hopefully, you can choose a piece to move. And then you have to verify that your piece can move n spaces, where n is your dice roll. So that's going to depend on your piece and what position it is on the board. Then you move the piece, and to move the piece you have to update the position of the piece, and you also have to tell the original board square your piece was on that this piece is no longer on it, although that doesn't apply if your piece started off the board. And also you're going to have to tell the destination board square that your piece is now on it. So essentially there are 3 things you have to update. You have to update the position of the piece, you have to go to the original source board square and say there's no piece on me anymore. Then you have to go to the destination square and you have to say, well, this piece is now here. That way both the pieces and your stone know where the stone is. And there are a couple of special conditions you need to check for. One is if the piece is on the board, and if it's not on the board, its location is going to be none. You also want to know, is the piece finished traversing the board? If it is, you can't put it on the board again. And you can figure that out by checking the finished attribute. And it should be true if the piece has already traversed the board. Another thing you want to know is a piece on the destination square. If it is, and it's one of your pieces, well, then you can't move that stone. And if the destination square is a rosette and an enemy piece is there, you can't move. But if you can land on a rosette, you get another turn. So you have to roll the dice again, do your entire turn process again. And of course, if you get onto a rosette and you roll a 0 from there, well, your turn's gone, unfortunately. So, when we're moving a piece, we don't really care at all if there's a piece on an intervening board square. We don't care if it's your piece or an enemy piece. We just don't care. You only need to check if there's a piece on the destination square. And we know this isn't the official game rules, but we're just making your life easier. So hopefully you appreciate that. So an piece can only move forward or it can be kicked off the board. And that's why this game is actually relatively simple. It's not like chess, where some pieces can move forward or backward or sideways or along a diagonal. An piece can only move one direction, that's forward. And there's no, branching structure of the board. There's only one place a piece can go. It's just basically, a line, and it just traverses the line until you get to the end, and then you're done, unless it gets kicked off the board first.
You don't have to worry about any of the turning or any of that because that's handled by the next position.
Yeah. And it's not like Piopoly. With Piopoly, you got to go around the board, and then once you hit the go square, you're modding again. You don't need to do that here. You're just traversing a straight line. When you're done, you're done. Another important thing you want to know about, this is going to be really important for how you design your program. So a lot of variables in Python, you can assign them to another variable, and that makes a copy of the variable. hopefully by now you know that doesn't work that way with lists or dictionaries. We call that shallow copies, because basically what you're doing in that case is you're just making two names that point to the same list. So if I have a list called list 1, and then I say list 2 equals list 1, both list 1 and list 2 are the same list. And classes work exactly the same way. So if I have a board square object, and I say, board square 2 equals board square 1, I don't have two board squares. I just have one board square and two names for it. The way you create a board square object is you say, variable name equals board square, then two parentheses, how you were shown in a lecture. That is what you do to create an object. And that's actually pretty useful, because that means that you can have multiple names for the same object. So, the game board is a 2D list, and it consists of board square objects. So what I can do then is I can say, once I find an entry point for the white stone on the game board, I can make another variable and assign that board square position to this new variable. So that means I don't have to iterate through the game board again to find the entry point, because I've saved this variable off to the side that I know is always the entry point. And we'll show that to you in the code in a little bit. So basically, when you have an piece and there's a variable inside it that says location or position, I forget which it is. You remember, Brian?
It's position.
It's position, yeah. So there's a position variable inside each piece, but that's not a copy of a board square object. That is another name for the exact same board square object. So, what I can say is piece.position, that gives me the board square object. Then I can say .next white, and I get the next position that I can move to. And we'll also show you how to do that in a bit. And yeah, if we change the position of an piece, we're just changing what board square it's on. We're not making a new board square. We're not changing the original board square. We're just saying, the piece is on a different board square. And, that's just the way it is. I mean, you don't have to worry about it breaking or working a different way. It just doesn't work that way. It's, by default, it just makes shallow copies. So one of the important things you need to do is, when you're doing this game, is you have to find the entry point on the board, because you have to put the stone on the board. And the entry point is different for the black stones and for the white stones. So, the board is a 2D list, and that we don't really need to know constants, for the size of a list to iterate through it, because we have len. So all we have to do is just iterate through the boards, or through the game board, and find these entry points, because there's only one entry point per player, and each board square knows if it's an entry point. There's an attribute, a member attribute in game board or in board square for that. So what you do is you iterate through the list, and you find the location that's the entry point for white, create a variable, and set it equal to that location in the list. So that way you have a white square or white starting point board square, and you do the same thing for the black stones and the white stones. And yeah, it's just another name for it. It's you're not making a new board square. You're just saying this is a new name for the existing board square object.
This is where the hint from the homework comes in, where you are telling the piece where it should start if it's not on the board.
Yeah, you need to do that. So if I'm a black stone and I'm going to traverse the board, the first thing I need to know is where my entry point is, and I've just explained how to do that, and I'll kind of give you a bit of a hint in code later, for how to do that. So if I'm off the board and I move to the entry point, that counts as one move. So then, to move to the next position, if we roll 1, we just say, piece.position equals piece.position.next black. And that just updates the position of the piece. And you can see that right here. That's what I did. You say self.position.next black, and you got the next square that you can move to. Just say the piece's position is that. And you repeat this over and over again if you're moving multiple times. So, a loop is very useful for something like that. And if we're moving off the board, we just set the location to none, and we set its self.complete property to true. And if we're kicking off the board, we just set its location to none. We don't set its complete property to true. It's not that easy, unfortunately. And you always have to roll precisely 1 beyond the last square to move off the board. If you don't, if you roll 2 beyond the last square, you can't move off the board. So you're just kind of stuck there until you can move off the board. So, the long and short of it is that you technically don't need to make any new classes for this. You just basically need to make functions and some variables, maybe lists and stuff like that. So really this involves a lot of if, else, branching control structure statements. And a lot of them will be nested because you have various conditions you need to check before you can move a piece. And you'll be using loops. If you land on a rosette, you need to take another turn. The only new class variables you need to create are pieces. You don't need to create board square objects. That gets created automatically. We'll show you in a minute. You don't have to create a royal game of object that's already created for you under if name equals main. So you also are going to have to divide the project into functions. And we gave you a lot of flexibility on that. Maybe that's too much flexibility, I don't know. But it's not really that hard to do, actually. Function is just a good choice for any part of the game that you're going to be repeating over and over. Then you can just call the function. You don't have to duplicate all these lines of code. So here's some examples of things you might want to create a function for. And these aren't rules. You don't have to create these functions. These are just examples you might want to think about. So you might want to have a function for playing a turn for one player. And it might take, as parameters the color of the player. And it might take, a dice roll or something like that. Just ideas. You might want to have a function to display a list of pieces that the player can move and their positions. If you looked at the sample output on the project doc, you've probably seen what I'm talking about. You might want to have a function to determine whether a player can move at all, and just you input the dice roll and compare it to all the player's pieces on the board and see if any of the pieces can move. Because it's theoretically possible that a player rolls something and none of their pieces can move, especially if they only have one stone left on the board. And of course, if you roll 0, you can't move. So you might want to have a function for moving a piece. This is pretty low-hanging fruit, I think. You might want to have a function for checking if the game's over, which you would do by looking at each piece and seeing if one of the players has all their pieces finished. You may want to have a function to find the starting squares. And yeah, these aren't required functions, they're just ideas for you. So the can move function was something kind of interesting that seemed to stump a lot of people. So basically, if we want to know if a piece can move, we need to know some information. So first of all, we need to know the color of the piece. And like I said a couple of minutes ago, there's a color variable in each piece object, but unfortunately, we just know that it contains some data. We don't know whether that means it's black or white. So we're going to need to provide a reference somehow, so that we know whether we're going to next black or next white. So you have to add a function parameter or an extra variable in the pieces constructor. There are multiple ways you can do it, and it's really up to you. We also need to know if there are pieces on the board, which you can easily find by checking the member variable for that. And if it's not on the board, we assume it starts on the starting square, and then we subtract one move from that, because moving to the starting square counts as one move. And if the piece is finished, it can't move either, because it's finished traversing the board. So then what we do is, once we check for those things, we find the destination square. And then we check if the piece can legally go there. And, again, that's just, is the destination square a rosette? Is another piece there? Then you can't move. Is the destination square, does it have one of your pieces? Then you can't move, and so forth and so on. And again,
you don't want to change anything there.
Yeah, you don't want to change anything. You just need to find the square. And you don't want to update the piece's location. You just need to find the new board square. And just kind of a reminder, don't use magic values. Don't assume a specific game board. Game boards vary. You were provided with 2 game boards. And don't assume a magic number of pieces either. We've got a constant already given to you for that. And the same thing goes for printing a menu. Technically, you might be printing a menu of 7 pieces, but don't program 7 into that. What if the number of pieces changes? I mean, we're probably not going to do that for grading purposes, but just don't do that. You don't want your code to break arbitrarily. So that's all for that. And what we're going to do now is we're going to pull up the actual code and take a look at it. Let's look here and find the starter code. So here's the starter file for this, and here's the board square starter file. So we might as well, we're at the board square, so we might as well talk about that. So again, here's the piece class. you can see that it has variables here for the color of the piece, which is going to be some string that you pass to the constructor. It has a variable for the position, like you see it starts at none, but this is going to eventually be a board square object. And it's not going to be a copy of a board square, it's going to be pointing to a board square. And this is true or false if it's complete. Let me check my font size. Maybe I should increase it. That's better. So true or false whether or not it's complete, and a symbol, which you determine when you decide the player symbol. So here's the can-move function. So again, you need to write it. You need to be checking these parameters, and you're going to want to add a parameter either up here in the constructor or maybe here to say what's the white color, and you can say if my color is the white color, then I go to the next white, and if it's not, I go to the next black. So you could do something like that.
Yeah. Right. Whatever Jeff says. He's so good at this.
Yeah, definitely, Kevin. Definitely. Kevin. Hi, Kevin.
Jeff is best here. Hello. Howdy.
Howdy. How did your lab go, Kevin?
I sent all my students here, so
okay.
They should be able to tell you how my lab went.
All right. Well, they had better all be here for sure. So we just went through a PowerPoint, which they can once Eric posts the video, they can look through that.
Cool.
So we're just talking through the code now. So so much for the piece, and you're going to be creating piece variables. Technically, we call them objects, but for the purposes of Python, they're pretty much the same thing. When you get to C++, variables and objects are two different things, but that's not, that's another day.
Maybe you should use the word instances.
Yeah, we could also talk about instances. I think, what was it? Was I telling my lab session yesterday that variables and instances and objects are basically the same thing? In terms of Python, technically they sort of are. Because integers in Python they're technically objects. They have member functions inside of them. That's so much for the boards or the piece. So here's the board square, and you can see we've got a constructor here again, and we've got all these attributes. This is an piece. Right now it has none because there's no piece on it, but this is going to eventually point to an piece variable. You don't have to worry about this XY position. That's totally irrelevant for your purposes. What you want to know is the next white and next black, and these are going to be board square pieces. Same thing for this.
Also, self-position in board square is not the same thing as self-position in the
exactly. Yeah. This thing in piece, this dot position is a board square. This position is a tuple that represents the position of the board square in the game board list, and this basically is completely irrelevant to your code. You don't need to worry about it at all. Here's where it knows if it's an exit. This will contain a string that says white or black, if it's an exit point, and I'll show you about that in a minute. We'll look at the JSON file. Same thing for the entrance. It'll have a string that says white or black if it's an entrance. And there are only 2 entrance points in the board, so that means there will only be 2 board square objects that have a value other than nothing for entrance, and the same goes for exit. This is true if it's a rosette, because we can see how we're initializing it here. If it's forbidden, same thing. But technically, you don't care about this either, because you can't move to forbidden square anyway. It won't show up in the next white or next black. So that's just, for the provided code. And these functions load from JSON and JSONify. Don't worry about them. They're just pre-programmed functions for initializing a board square. So why don't we look at an example board actually? Let's look at the real thing. Here's original board. And like I said, a while back, it's a .ur file, but that's just a custom file extension. This is really a JSON file. And you can see it's kind of Python-like formatting. We've got 2 square brackets here. Kind of tells you we're talking about a 2D list. And you can see that the board square information is stored as a dictionary, which kind of makes sense because that's all the information we really need. And you don't really need to understand what this stuff is because it's all imported. What you probably do want to know is, let's find an example entry point. So you can see that this is not an entrance because it has an empty string. It's not an exit because that's also an empty string. Let's see if we can find an entry or exit point.
I think the way I usually do it is I Control F.
Yeah. Here we go. Here's an entrance. So you can see it. this is how it knows if it's an entrance. The entrance variable here in board square is going to contain this text. It's going to contain quote white with a capital W. And same thing goes for black. Let's find that one. Here's the black one. And it's going to contain black with a capital B. But all the other ones would just have an empty string because they're not entrance points. These are the only 2 entrance points on the entire board. Same goes for exit. Here's the white exit point.
Seem to be doing great. I'm gonna leave it to you guys because
Alright. Bye.
I'm gonna go help some students, some stuff. Bye.
Bye.
Good luck. You guys got it. Amazing. I'll be watching though. So
Okay.
got my eyes on you. Bye.
Good. Yeah. So here's the black exit point. Hang on. Let me check something quickly. All right. So, yeah, that's kind of the structure of the original board. And the 2 lines board is the same thing. It just has fewer squares on it. So that's the board square.py file. And remember, the only function you need to implement in here is the canMove function. The rest of the stuff is pretty much good. Like I said, you'll probably want to add a parameter here, maybe a variable here, but the rest of it's good. So here's the starter file. You don't have to mess with this importing business. Here's the starting pieces. Any extra constants you need, you probably want to put them here. Just a generous hint. You might find that you need a constant or so at some point. So don't use a magic number. Here's the constructor. It's very likely that you're going to want to add variables, and you'll want to do them here. So, I might say self.some variable, and I can always initialize it to none, even if it's later going to be a number. I can just initialize anything to none, frankly. But I could say it equals 5 if I wanted to. I can make any kind of variable here that I want. I'm just going to backspace on it because it's totally useless at this point, and I don't want to accidentally upload this file and everybody is downloading a broken file. Because technically I could do that.
You could. It's important to note that when it comes to the constructor, just because you add a variable in it doesn't mean that it now needs to be a parameter in the constructor.
Yes. Yeah, that's true, because the constructor is creating the variable, but you can set its value later if you want to. You don't have to set it now. And actually, you probably don't want to add parameters to the constructor, because if you do, you're going to have to set it down here, and let's just not go there. Here's the load board function. You don't have to mess with this. You don't have to add comments. I saw somebody was like, do I need to comment Eric's code? No, you don't have to comment Eric's code. Let Eric's code be the way it is. That's his problem. And you can see here's the game board variable. It's just a list, and it's self.board, and here's where we create it. And at various points we append stuff to it using some really complicated looking code here. And you can see here that at various points we're accessing it using 2D list notation. So this is really a 2D list of board square objects. And you can see here they're setting the next black, and here they're setting the next white. So this is for the same board square object, we're finding the next white and the next black, we're setting them here. And I'm just telling you this so you know that's what is happening. You don't have to know anything about this function, really. You don't have to know about the exceptions. This is just the functions provided to you, really generously by Eric. Same thing goes for the draw block function and the display board function. These are all provided to you. You just call the display board function if you want to print stuff on the board. That's all. Roll d4 dice again. This is going to give you a number from 0 to 4. Really, that's all there is to it. And you can see that technically the ways that this is working is we create an integer variable, set it to 0. We run this loop 4 times and choose 0 or 1, and just append that 0 or 1 to dots, which means you could get anything from 0 to 4. And then this is the real function you have to implement. So really, for this entire Royal Game of Ur class, you're probably going to be modifying the constructor. You might be adding some constants. You don't have to modify any of these functions. It's really just the play game function you need to implement. And you'll probably, add some extra functions down here, def, some weird function, and you'll, of course, remember to add self, but, PyCharm does that automatically. So if you're using PyCharm, which you should be, or Visual Studio Code or some other really cool editor, it might add that for you automatically. But then, you might want to add other parameters here. And then you can do stuff, you can return values, whatever you really want to do. And I'll just give you a really generous hint. You probably are not going to need to write a function that returns an piece or a board square. I mean, you might find a way to do it, but you probably just don't need to. You might find yourself passing an piece to a function. By all means, you might find yourself doing that. So yeah, I mean, that's all there is. You do not have to modify the if name equals main code, because you can see we're creating a royal game of object here, and we're playing the game. That's all you need to do here, so you don't have to modify that at all. And this kind of comes back to the whole idea about what I was saying about shallow copies. You can see that I'm setting RGU to a new royal game of object. That's how we create a new royal game of object. If I were setting it to another already created object, it would just be a shallow copy. So actually, I'm going to add just a little bit of example code here. None of this is actually going to work for playing the game, so it isn't going to help you to copy and paste this into your own game, but this is just going to kind of reinforce some points. So if I want to have an piece, I could say some piece equals piece. And see, what parameters do I have? I have to pass a color and a symbol. So let's make a constant for color. Let's say white color equals white. Let's just say white this way, because that's the way it is in the JSON file. And we need a symbol, so we'll say white symbol equals W. And then I just pass white color, not white symbol, and then like that. And so I have my piece. Now I can say some piece dot, let's see. So I could set the position, it's none, that's fine. If, for some reason I decide this piece is already complete, I could say dot complete equals true, and now my piece is finished running the board. Kind of useless since I didn't even bother to traverse it. And I can say can move equals some piece dot can move. Is there any parameter here now? Let's pass it 4 for the number of moves. And so what I'm doing here is I'm getting the result of the can move function called on this piece, and it'll store a variable here, and this variable will tell me whether or not some piece is able to move for positions.
Yeah, it's true or false.
Yeah, it's true or false. And if I want to move some piece to its next square, let's just assume that some piece is set to some board square object. Actually, let's say some piece dot board. Well, no, it's location. What position? It's dot position. Dot position equals self dot board. Remember, this is the game board. And let's say just 0, 0. I don't know if that's even a legal square, but we'll just set it to that. So we'll say that's the position. And then I can say, if I want to move some piece 1 square, I just say some piece dot position equals some piece dot position dot. This is a white one, so it's next white. Let's just verify that. Yeah, it's next white. And so this moves it to the next white square. And if it were a black stone, I do the same thing, next black. And that updates its position. And like I said, this is a shallow copy. So I'm just saying, this is another name for the next square on the board, and that happens to be where I am. But the actual board squares are being stored in the self.board list. And if you want to get really technical, the stuff that's stored in the self.board list, these indices are just another name for the object. It just kind of exists somewhere in memory, and Python knows the address for it, and it's storing the address in here. And that's why some of you were trying to print objects, and you were getting some sort of weird output saying board square object 0x5802ABC or whatever. That's just the address in memory of the object. So that's why you don't want to print the raw object. You always want to print a member variable.
You always print out the information that you care about.
Yeah. I mean, yeah, you can print the address in memory, but why would you? Why would you?
Yeah, Pepin doesn't do anything with it anyway.
You know what? I'm going to give Kevin moderator position. Kevin, you're a moderator now. You can moderate this chat if you want to. He'll hear that in about 10 seconds because that's what the lag time's like.
I think he'll notice the power immediately though.
Yeah, I think he will. Don't abuse your power, Kevin. Be nice. Be nice. We know you're secretly nice, even though you like to pretend you're not, but just don't abuse your power. What's this about using a MacBook for transferring your files?
I've heard on the MacBook FileZilla is often used, but
okay, yeah. I mean I have FileZilla on my PC, but you can also transfer files using SFTP. I don't want to do. I'll show you how to do that in a minute. It's a useful thing to know. There's SCP as well. I don't know how to use SCP. I know how to use SFTP, but they kind of do the same thing in different ways.
Yeah, they're very similar. I just SCP ends up just moving one file at a time, which is
okay. Yeah, which is probably what you want to do. So just look up the documentation for what is it? It's not OpenSSL. Is it OpenSSH? Something like that is what these are. Okay, so
yeah, it's OpenSSH.
Yeah, so it's OpenSSH. You just Google documentation for that, and it'll tell you how to use those commands. So let's see. So Brian, can you think of anything else we had to talk about before we just open it up for questions?
No, I think that was pretty in depth.
Yeah, I think so too. So yeah, there was something else I wanted to show them too. I think, but I can't remember what it was. Maybe I did show them everything because I showed them the JSON file, showed them both, both files. So I think I pretty much covered the bases here. Yeah, so I'll show you how to use SFTP. I'll show you SSH first, actually. So you can use PuTTY to connect to GL, but as it turns out, you can also use SSH. That works on Macs, works on Windows 10, works on Linux. You just type SSH, your username, which in my case is jmartinate@gl.umbc.edu, and then you type your password, which is very secret, and then you're into GL. And I could have used PuTTY. This does exactly the same thing. And I've got all these directories here. This is like from way back when I took 201 myself. What do I have? Projects. What do we do for projects? Let's do Proj 1. What was that? What's Proj 1? I'm sure it's nothing you did.
I'm pretty sure we had different.
Yeah, this is like some sort of baking project. Oh yeah, we had to go shopping and what was it? Was this pumpkin bread? Croissants. Maybe we were making croissants. Okay, and macarons and baguettes. So we were running like a little bakery. That's what we were doing for Project 1. Anyway, yeah. So this is SSH, and I'll just exit out of that. So we're closed. So if you want to transfer files, let me find a file to transfer. There's some sort of code file I can transfer. I should have. Oh yeah, here's one. All right, so I'm going to change direct. So here's the thing you want to know about SFTP. If you're using SFTP to transfer a file, before you run your SFTP command, navigate to the directory where the file is. That just will make your life a little easier. So I'm going to change to my desktop, and so I've got scrambler.py, and I'm going to upload that to GL. So what I'm going to do, this works kind of like SSH really. So I'm going to say SFTP jmartinate@gl.umbc.edu, enter my password, and this looks like OpenSSH, but it's not. You can only transfer files here. You can't run your Python code with SFTP. So we can do ls to see where we are. So let's say cd 201 projects, proj1. What? Oh, cd projects, proj1. And then I can, so if I want to upload my scrambler.py file, I just type put scrambler.py, hit enter, and it's uploaded. And if I want to download it, I just type get scrambler.py, and that downloads it to my current working directory, which is desktop. Then I can exit, and if I want to verify the files there, and there it is. I'm going to remove it. That's good. All right, so that's how you use SFTP and SSH. So much for that. Okay, so yeah, I think we're done showing you, what we had. So at this point, I guess we'll take questions. So just start typing questions into the chat, and we'll answer them for you for a while. And I'm not going to bother to go scrolling way up through the chat. So just post it now. If you posted it earlier, whatever. Okay, so Nicholas is getting a none type error when he's moving his pieces, but when you print out the position, it is not none. Can't get any further. So, yeah, so this none type business, if you're moving a piece, remember we're looking at self.position. And, of course you have to set it to something so that it's on the game board first. So you have to identify where the starting square is. I don't know offhand what the index of it is, but let's just assume it's 0, 0. So you'd set it to game board 0, 0, and then it has a position. And then at that point, you should not be getting your none type error. And then if you want to move it, you say, erpiece.position.next white, and you set it to that. Because next white should never really be none unless you get to the last square on the board. And I hope that that's somewhat enlightening. The problem is, in such a general format, I can't give you anything extremely specific because I'm not looking at your code. So you might just have to go to office hours on that one.
Record legal. I'm going to assume not.
Yeah. So Ryan's wondering, can move function and a move function. Yeah, so there's the can move function in the erpiece class, which you do need to implement, and if you're going to have a function for moving it, it's going to have to be separate from this. This can move function does not move pieces. It just sees that the piece can move.
The code ends up being very similar, albeit
yeah, it's
ever
very
so slightly.
similar. And Brian knows. Brian wrote the entire Royal Game of Earth project for himself, and his code works, at least as far as I've seen. So, yeah.
I copied and pasted and then made some small changes. So,
so Christina, yeah, you're probably going to have to find some way to transfer your can move function from your homework doc to your project. I mean, there are various ways you can do it. If you can't figure out how to copy and paste, just like retype it. It probably won't take you too long. Hey, Min. Min, you're now a moderator. Let's see. What did you say? REPR illegal. What does that mean?
See? It's the official string representation of the object. I wouldn't mess with that.
Okay, yeah. What's the So somebody's wondering, what's the difference between the erpiece self.position and the board square self.position? Oh, that's a good question. We actually talked about that like 10 minutes ago. But yeah, so you can still see the erpiece code on my screen. This self.position, this is a board square object. Right now it's set to none, when we're creating the erpiece, but this is going to be a board square object. And the self.position here in board square, this is just an x and y tuple that's probably going to represent the position in the 2D list. This variable is totally irrelevant for your purposes. It's completely handled in the background. Just pretend it doesn't exist. Oh, hi, Michal. You can be a moderator too. There you go.
Asking, yes. Jeff is going to be nice enough to share the recording to Professor Eric, who will post it on his.
Yeah, and I thought about saying this a while back, but yeah, unfortunately, when I share this video with Eric, the chat is going to disappear. So, whatever whatever wonderful chats you were just posting here, it's all going to be gone. So, if you thought that somebody else was later going to be watching this video and scrolling through and seeing the really cool joke you posted, I'm afraid you're out of luck. Yeah. So, so Danny's wondering, we don't put the homework part 5 problem inside our main code, right? Well, you're going to put it here in the piece class. So here's the can-move function. This is the function you did for part 5 of your homework 6. And you just copy and paste that code here. And if you don't know how to copy and paste it, just retype it. It'll only take you like a minute or so. It won't hurt you. So next white only moves one at a time, correct? Yeah, that is correct. Next white gets you the very next square. So if you want to move 4 squares, you have to go to next white 4 times. So you probably want to loop for that.
Can move only checks if the move is legal.
Yeah.
The move function will actually do.
Yeah. Can move checks to see if the move's legal. So, you're going to want a placeholder. So, probably for can move, we want to make a variable called I am here equals, no, that's not a good choice. That's not a bad name. We're supposed to give good descriptive names. Let's say
position, maybe?
Location, because we have position already. Location equals self.position. And then now location is a board square object, so I can say location equals location.next white. And I can just repeat this, a couple times if I'm, wait a minute. So this would move me 2 squares. So now I know, now location is the square 2 places ahead of where my piece is now. And I can check, well, can I move my piece to location? Because you see, I haven't actually moved my piece at all. I've just, made a copy of where the self.position is now. And then I've taken that copy and I've moved the copy around. I haven't moved self.position around. Is the board square different for the project versus homework 6? I don't think so. It's the same board square as far as I know. You think anything changed, Brian?
I know actually the professor said he was going to change something about printing, but I think that was in Royal.
Okay.
There shouldn't be any changes to board square.
Yeah, I agree. I think the board square is pretty much, it is what it is. So Peter, am I going to post this on Eric's only? Yeah, at this point I'm just going to post it on Eric's only, and the reason for that, the main reason for that is this is the first time I've ever really done a live stream, so unfortunately I'm not a live stream guru. So in my previous attempts earlier today, I couldn't figure out how to save the video, so that's just something that I'll figure out later. But I am recording this on my computer, and I'll send that to Eric, so he will upload that. Yeah. So Sophie's wondering, so once we move the copy around, which information do we need to edit in the board square to make sure the symbol can be added or removed from the board display? Oh, so what you want to know for showing where a piece is on the board is that's all here in board square. So the display board function, which is here, that's just iterating through the game board and displaying the board square objects. But as it turns out, each board square knows what piece is there. Actually, question, Brian. For self.piece, is that going to be a string or is that going to be an piece?
Self.piece should be an piece.
Okay, I wasn't sure. So this self.piece is going to be an piece. So whenever you're moving an piece, the destination board square needs to be updated with the piece that is at that location. And when you do that, then the next time you print next time you run the display board function, when the board prints, when it prints that square, it'll print your piece on it. You just have to make sure you remember to tell the originating square that your piece used to be on that your piece is no longer there. So you're going to want to set its self.piece to none because your piece has left it.
Yeah, the 3 steps you mentioned before. Where I was should know that I'm not there anymore. Yeah. I should know where I'm going, and where I'm going should know that I'm not there.
Yeah, you want to make sure you do those 3 steps. Um, let's see. So when we move it, we change it back to none. Yeah, so Sophie, when you move the piece, the place it was goes back to none. But the destination does not go to none unless you're moving the piece off the board. And then, you set it to none again. Yeah, so Provar, hopefully I'm pronouncing your name right. So both the class of variables point to each other. Yeah, that's kind of the way it is. Piece points to a board square object, and a board square object points to an piece object. Board square object doesn't always point to an piece object because at any given point in the game, probably most of the board squares won't have an piece on them. Just, a couple of them will. Ryan's wondering, would I make the move function in the piece class or the board class? I think you would probably make the move function here under the Royal Game of class, because here you're going to have somewhere inside here you're going to have variables that represent or pieces. So you're probably going to create these pieces under the constructor here, and then you'll probably want to have a function called like move piece, and then it'll take the piece object and it'll update its properties in here. You could put it here under play game. Yeah, so Spencer's wondering, so I managed to get my pieces to move from the entrance around the board, but the board doesn't update to display the current pieces on the board. What do I need to do to fix that? Well, you need to make sure that you're updating the board square. You can't just update the piece and let me put pass back in here. You can't just update the piece's position and consider yourself done. You also need to take the destination board square and you need to say that its piece is the piece. So you'd probably be saying, this is not something you'd put in can move, but just for example, self.position is now the new position, so I say self.position dot piece equals self. And this kind of looks kind of recursive in a way, but that's really what's happening. I'm saying self.position, which is this board square, and then I'm going here and I'm saying what's its piece is now going to be self, whatever the current piece object is. Danny is wondering how come sometimes when I call with class.var it says there's no attribute. Well, that's because the attribute doesn't exist. So these are called attributes, like self.caller is an attribute. We also call them variables, but apparently inside classes Python calls them attributes. So if you're getting an error that says the attribute does not exist, that means you didn't create it. And you need to remember you want to create these inside the constructor. So if I need to add a new variable to piece, I'd say self.new variable equals something, and now it exists. But if I don't do this and I try to say piece.new variable, I'm going to get an attribute error because it doesn't exist. So that's what it is. Can you use recursion for the movement part? Maybe. Why would you?
If you like. I mean, if you really like.
yeah, I agree with you, McCall. Yeah, you don't need to use recursion, nor would you want to. Definitely agree with that. I would not want to use recursion here.
I think the first thing I mentioned when I talked about recursion to my lab was any loop can be turned into recursion, but doesn't mean that it should.
Yeah. And the thing about recursion is you'll probably be told at some point, either next semester in 202 or something, that recursion can actually be not the most efficient way to solve problems. Because technically anything you can write recursively, a lot of it can be written with loops in a way that's about as faster, and then you don't have to worry about stack overflows.
You can do it iteratively.
Yeah, but the thing is to use recursion because in some cases it's just much simpler to write recursive code than to write it the other way. And hi again, Kevin. Hopefully you appreciated being made a moderator, Kevin.
Thank you. Yeah, I was staring at the ban button a few times, but I resisted.
Yeah, you need to restrain yourself, Kevin.
Just share your screen so we can see it live here, and I'm not watching a delay of I don't know if you know. You share your screen on Discord, so
share my screen on Discord.
Yes, I can see the delay. No. Yes.
I wonder how that would turn out.
It would be great. Also, your live stream will automatically upload to your channel.
Okay, well I'll have to see because previously it wasn't doing that. But it should go on Eric's channel anyway, I think.
Yeah, I agree.
Okay, so yeah, I'm screen sharing to Discord, so you should be able to see that now.
Yep.
Yeah. Okay. So let's see.
I just realized I'm talking to you as well.
Hi. Yeah, so if you want, you can just look at my screen share here. Then you won't have the 10-second delay.
Delay was fun. So
Yeah.
Danny asked, are you not able to call a self.var from another class that's not the init function? The wording is a bit interesting for this question, but self.variable only works when you're working on methods or functions
Inside the
within
class.
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah, so I'm only using self inside the piece class definition. When I'm over here and I'm making my piece, I do not use self. So here's an piece, and you can see that when I'm setting its complete, I'm not saying self.complete, I'm saying, some piece.complete, because some piece is the variable name. You only use self inside the class definition. And that's why here, inside play game, I'm saying self.displayBoard. That's because the displayBoard function is just here. It's inside the same class, so I do use self for that. Self just refers to the current object, that we're working inside of. Because, these functions could theoretically be used with multiple variables that are like Royal Game of variables. So we just use self to refer to the current variable. Let's see. Let's see if we can find. Does anybody else have questions? If you do, by all means, post them in the chat. But if people run out of questions, we'll just stop the stream.
I do have a quick note on recursion I can add, since I know we've recently covered recursion and classes sort of at the same time. In general, you want to use recursion for problems which don't have a clear limit. Like with a Fibonacci problem, like it can keep going forever. And if you know your limits, like if you're using an array, or in here we have a defined board, then definitely use a loop.
Yeah.
Because that's something you can clearly state.
Yeah, thanks. Let's see here. Okay. Oh, how many lines total did you have, Brian?
That's
you want to guess, Brian?
Question. I know I have at least 200.
You know what? I'm going to look. And I'm going to look on my other screen. So, the live stream can't see this. So they won't be able to see your codes. That's good. I'm sure they would love to see your code, though.
They would love to. I follow all the coding conventions.
Yeah, actually, sure you did. You didn't use any list comprehensions, did you?
I did not.
Okay. Yeah, I was actually. I was doing something when I was trying to code up my own piece, Royal Game of and yeah, I think I initially used a list comprehension. And I was like, you know what? If I'm posting this to the TA Solutions, I probably better not do that.
So it's apparently 326 lines for the Royal
Okay.
That's what the original was.
The original one, yeah, you probably just added 20 lines there. Okay. Well, I don't have to look since you looked.
I added about 200 lines to Royal then, in that case. And I had maybe 40 to 50 lines for Can Move. That sounds exaggerated.
Yeah, Caleb, you're welcome. We're glad you appreciate that. But in a way, we're just kind of saving our own selves because office hours was incredibly busy today. So I'm hoping that this stream kind of takes a little bit of the pressure off. I think today...
Eric's outro?
What was that, Kevin?
Do you want to run Eric's outro? Because I made the outro. I have the file.
You have the... Oh, wow.
I made it. I was the one that made his outro. I made Johnson one too, but he's not using it. But I have the file. We could totally run Eric's outro. Hold on. You could keep going for stream. I'll send it to you.
All right, good.
So Peter asked before, is there a specific number a piece needs to enter the board, or can it be any number? It needs to at least be 1 to enter the board. If that's what was being asked.
Yeah, you have to roll 1 to enter the board. That's true. All right. What do you got, Kevin?
No, it's too powerful. Give
It's
it.
too
I did it in HD. It's way too powerful.
Okay. Yeah. Well, we definitely don't want you to accidentally send malicious code here, because then I would have to reinstall the operating system on my computer, and I don't really have time for that right now. My semester is too busy. Yeah, I don't want I don't want a virus on my
Too
computer
busy
right
to
now.
fix everything.
Here,
How do you change a board square, not a shallow copy? Kind of similar to how you would do it with like a list or a dictionary. You would have to make a complete copy of it, but it's harder to do it with classes.
So Kevin, what were you going to show me? Was it a PYC file or what?
I wasn't showing you anything.
Oh, I thought you were going to send me something.
Oh, I was gonna show you the fudging outro file.
Oh, okay, whatever. Okay, yeah. So, what should we like play a game of?
Play a game?
Yeah, let's do that.
Sure.
I'm gonna pull up.
Chef, I'll play you.
Is there a way to do that? Which website does that?
Oh, I'm not sure. I only know of a local multiplayer, but I can look into it.
Okay.
I have been playing too many games of Ur on my own time, and it's really hard to find a good AI to play against.
Yeah, I'm sure.
After you pick up their patterns.
I haven't even played a complete game yet, so I'm sure you'll slaughter me, but you know, it's definitely worthwhile. Yeah, if you find that in the next couple of minutes, let me know. Yeah, okay. Let's see, any more questions?
Do we have to make a list of board squares? That's already done.
Yeah, so self.board. This is a 2D list, and it contains board square objects. All of them are created for you already, and they are already updated to point to the correct next board square, so you don't have to do anything with that. You never have to create any board squares. You don't have to initialize any of their values. All you have to do is say if there's now a piece there. That's all. You don't have to change any of the other variables at all. In fact, you don't want to. It'll break your code. Yeah, Christina. Yeah, well, I mean, theoretically, I guess you could forfeit a turn if you land on Rosette. You don't technically have to roll again in the real world. But I think in this game, we're probably just going to make them roll again. It's just extra complicated to add the functionality to decline a turn. Now, if you would roll again and roll a 0, well, then your second turn would be forfeit, for sure. Yeah, so...
Yeah, hard coding is something we tend to avoid because we are not guaranteed to be using the original board for testing. In fact, chances are we probably won't.
Yeah, don't hard code it. Make it flexible. That's why I would recommend doing a loop through the self.board and finding the board square that's an entrance point for white and finding the board square that's an entrance point for black. Because you remember, that's a string stored in the entrance variable inside the board square. So then I would identify those, and I would create like a white entrance variable and a black entrance variable and set them equal to whatever that board square is, and then I just have them, in my program. In fact, I would probably create them up here under the constructor and then call a function to populate them with the correct value. And then if you do this, it doesn't matter what board square what game board you have. It could be the 2 lines game board, it could be the original board, or it could be a custom board. Your code will still work because it'll just loop through the board to find the entrance point. So Emily's wondering, if we don't change the piece position and can move, where do we change it? That's a good question. I would suggest making a move function inside Royal Game of Ur. So, maybe under def play game, I would say like def, I have to unindent, def move, like that, and do that. And it'll duplicate a lot of the code from can move. But, the purpose of the can move function here is to determine if you can move. It's not to make the move, because, sometimes you can't move. And so if you're trying to check if you can move and you're kind of moving in the process, then you have to figure out where you were, and you have to move your piece back, and that'll be kind of complicated and it'll be a big pain. So that's why we separate these out into 2 separate bits of functionality.
You wouldn't want to have another loop to find the location where the Ur piece is, because it knows.
Yeah, you already know where it is, because we've got this position variable. The position variable is the current board square that it's on. So then I can say, if I want to move my Ur piece, I just do this. I say somepiece.position equals somepiece.position.next white, and that just moves it to the next white square. Oh, you found it. Let me try this.
I forgot that I uploaded it when I first was creating it. I had him approve a few different varieties of it, and that was the one he settled on. And it was uploaded on my YouTube channel already, so I was like, okay, well, that's easy.
Okay. You know what? I think I have to register for this, but I think it's worth doing.
Oh, you're gonna play Game of Royal?
Yeah, I am.
Who's gonna win? Whoever wins gets to be the best TA.
I am not going to win. I can guarantee you that.
Oh, really?
Just an online version of it.
This game it's a lot of randomness in it, since it's pretty much decided by the dice throws.
Really?
I would say it's like 60% decided by the dice throws, and the 40% is like logic and like after you play for a while, there's some tactics, like sneaky things you can do. Also there's probability in it. So here's a question to the students. What is the most common thing I will roll? Right? I have 4 dice, and each one has a 50% chance of rolling like a white blob or none. So, 23. That's right, yeah, 2 is the most common thing.
You uploaded, you sent us a picture of the distribution at one point, didn't you?
Yeah, I did. I was playing with another, like, AI, and it kindly kept track of each score. So yeah, it distributes nicely, and you can guess what's the least common thing that you'll roll. There's 2 things that are the least common things.
0?
Yeah, that's one of them.
That's great. 0?
So it's 0 and 4, right? You can all, like, roll all 1s or roll all 0s, like, for each separate die. And your chances of rolling a 0 or a 4 are 1 in a 16th chance. And then you have 1 and 3, those are, you have a 1/8 chance. And then a 2, you have a 1/4 chance. So yeah,
I'm trying to find how I would play you, Mihal. But I made an account, and I select to play a person, but where do I, like, challenge you or what?
Okay, I also just... Do you have the message that says you are waiting to play a basic game?
No.
Oh.
It just shows me the game board.
Is it the
Now,
first
I can play the computer.
Try scrolling down a bit.
Okay.
You should see a blue button that says click here. It pretty much throws you in a queue.
Oh, okay. Oh, so I can't just challenge a specific person.
Yeah, it's not that sophisticated, but hopefully since we queued up
okay. All right. Well,
at the same time, this is the best thing I could find.
I can't even find it. So you know what? I'm just going to play the AI.
Okay. Oh, but this is an ugly one then. Play the first one if you're playing an AI.
Which
She's got 2 links. The first
It's
link?
the one, yeah, the first one. I like that AI a little better, and also the board is pretty. This one is, the website's kind of ugly.
All right.
Oh, yeah, the webs? Just kidding.
Yeah, but yeah. Okay. All right. This is the right one. You'll be able to see it in like 8 seconds.
See.
Or
aren't you sharing your screen?
I am sharing my screen, so you should see it now, actually. All right. Black player, human. I'll be the black player. White player. Let's do an easy AI, because I've never played a complete game.
You should have done hard.
No, I'm probably going to lose with the easy AI anyway, Kevin.
Easy AI is probably just randomly choosing all of its turns.
Probably. All right. New game. So, what?
Oh, hold on. Click join. That's me. I am M Triangle 482.
Where on where I'm now?
Yeah.
Oh.
Going.
Here we go. Register. All right.
Did you register yet?
Google.
Oh, you just gave out your email address? Jeez.
I don't care.
I know. I mean, we all know it already, so.
All right. Here
my name was just there. My name should pop up.
It does. So.
Wait, are we playing?
Which color goes first? Is it black or white?
White.
Okay.
Don't you roll first?
No, white always goes first.
Well, that's in chess.
Oh, I think in the real game, I think you roll.
I think I go
Oh,
first.
no.
Well, maybe I'm just dumb.
Jeff.
Fine.
Oh, we're playing. Okay, that's good.
Yeah.
I think it was mentioned in the document that white always goes first.
Yeah.
So maybe that's just the way that we're doing it.
No clue. I thought I just saw someone
So,
play it.
okay. So
What,
yeah,
you
I just
know?
rolled a 1. I can really only do one thing. And here I think you have to drag the piece on the board.
Yeah, I think
It's
you do.
not my favorite one.
Alright. Let's see, what did I do?
You click the green box that is moving.
Yeah, I know.
This is definitely the
I'm just talking to myself.
ugliest.
Oh,
Okay.
oh, this is good. I kicked you off the board, right?
What?
I'm sure I'll still lose.
You didn't.
I just kicked you off the board, one of your pieces.
You're not.
Are you guys not playing the same person? Holy fudge! This is
Maybe we aren't.
No. I'm playing. My board says I'm playing Jeff.
Okay, yeah, she's on Jeff board. This is you're playing. She's playing you.
AI playing as me? I did not make those turns. Like, I'm not.
Maybe we should try this some other time.
Oh, yeah, that sounds good. I'm not making those turns. I'm just watching an easy AI. I think
Yeah,
because
you
you
would
selected
probably make
AI
better-
instead of human.
You would probably make better turns than that anyway.
Yeah, since you selected easy AI, the
Yeah, that's
game
probably
just,
why.
it looks like the game automatically pulled up my name and put it there, but it didn't change who the actual player
All
is.
right. Okay, so what? It's 9:47 p.m. So anybody have any last questions before we kill this stream?
Yeah.
What's that, Kevin?
I don't know. I just want to say yes. It was for fun.
You just want to say yes.
Yes.
What's a good question to ask Kevin?
No question.
No question?
Yes.
Kevin, is your 341 project done, or are you submitting it late?
It was due like 50 minutes ago. So
I
yeah.
know
Yeah,
that.
it was just due.
I know that, so I'm just asking you, did you submit it on time, or are you submitting it
Yes,
late?
I submitted it on time.
Good for
Did
you,
you submit
Kevin.
yours on time?
Yes, I
Question mark?
did. One clap
Early,
for Kevin.
probably.
It was due at like 10? That's an interesting time to think too.
What? It was due at 9.
9. 9.
Caleb, pineapple definitely does not belong on pizza. That's for sure.
Oh, that, okay, we're gonna fight now. No, pineapple can go on pizza just fine. You leave it there. No debate.
So
Do we
somebody's
have a
wondering.
question?
Yeah,
Oh, sorry,
somebody's
we
wondering
answered
about
that.
going over entering the board again. So yeah, so to enter the board, let's go back to the code. So
Hey,
you've
so
got-
real quick, sorry. If you say I'm wrong, I'm gonna ban you, JKs. But you go ahead, sorry. I just want to say that.
you can't ban me, Kevin. You don't have the
I'm
power.
not gonna ban you. People in chat say I'm wrong. I'm not wrong.
Oh,
so-
you're gonna ban the person from the chat. Be nice, Kevin.
Okay, I will.
Show the soft side of your personality for a bit.
Okay, I got it.
Yeah,
I'll shut
yeah.
up.
So if we have an piece, and we want to put it on the board, we just find the starting position on the board, which I was recommending, making a variable for that. So you could say starting position, whatever. That's not coding standards. I have to backspace. I could say starting position equals, and then I'll loop through the game board to find that. So then I have my starting position, and I just say some piece dot position equals starting position, and then I've moved it one place. That's how you would enter the board. Blossom's wondering, should we make extra functions? Yes, you better make extra functions because you're required to make at least 4. If you make even 3 functions, even 3, you're going to lose points. So make 4 functions, make more than 4 functions.
Functions also make life so much easier.
Yeah,
I was gonna say that. I was about to say that. I was about to say functions
Yeah,
will make your life easier.
it's not really, us being mean. We really want your life to be easier. So we just require you to make your life easy. That's how we, that's a good way to think about it, right, Kevin?
Yeah, it makes a problem small and it allows you to reuse your code too, and also makes
Yeah.
it easier to find a problem in your code if there is one. So, make functions. It'll save you so much more time.
Also save us time.
Yeah, so Dom, you're wondering if can move only looks if a piece is able to move, it doesn't actually move the piece. That is correct. You don't move the piece in the can move function. This is just for finding if you can move. you probably want to write a new function here under Royal Game of for moving the piece, actually. And it'll contain a lot of the same code.
A quick note about functions. If you find that you're writing in main and you happen to have many lines of code in main, that should probably be a function. You do not want to have a lot of logic happen in main.
Yeah, for sure. And that especially goes for here, because you should not add anything to main here. You should just leave it, with these 3 lines of code and let that be the way it is. All your code should be going under play game or whatever functions you're writing here, or whatever you're doing for the piece class. By the way, Mihal, do you say or?
I say the first one.
Okay, I've been sort of saying and occasionally I've been slipping and saying or. I think Eric maybe says
it's right?
Yes,
Oh,
sort of. I mean, hey, they probably didn't say back, what was it, 3,000 years ago when that city existed, or was it 4,000
Only
years ago?
3,000 years ago?
I think it was 4,000.
Yeah, I think it was like 1700 BCE or something like that.
A long time ago. Let's leave it at that.
But the one thing I know about the ancient city of Ur is that it had running water.
Had what?
It had running water. It had plumbing.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, here's
Agriculture.
here's the city. Where's?
And Ryan, you're correct in terms of Christina's question.
Yeah,
the
many
first thing-
structures for water resource management are in evidence. Sorry, what was that you were saying, Brian? I interrupted you.
Oh yeah, it's not the first place where the entrance is true, because that's not technically what entrance is. Entrance is a string, and it'll be white, black, or empty.
Well, John, it's not less than 4 functions automatic 0. We're not quite that mean. Although maybe Kevin would consider that. Would you consider that,
I was about to
Kevin?
say that. If you're my student, if you have less than 4 function, we might have some issues. But people know me too well already.
Yeah.
We can say for sure if you have less than 4 functions, you will be judged.
Yeah. I doubt that Sean has written the rubric yet, though. We should drag Sean on here and have him tell us how the rubric's going to be made.
That's true.
But he's not even online, so we can't drag him in here.
There is somewhat of an example rubric, although it doesn't show functions on it. But regardless, you shouldn't be changing the position of anything in can move. It literally just checks if you can.
Yeah, John, we're just finding that out. We're not putting it on the board at all. Carter's wondering if to check if the next position is a rosette, we need to check the next position itself and not check position next white black. Well, what I would do is I would, have a variable that I'm using, like a temporary variable for kind of moving through the board, and then I would move it to the destination, and then I would check, am I, is current position a rosette. But the thing is, if you really want to go into like really long spaghetti code, technically if starting position is, or if a position is a board square, I could say a position dot next white dot next white dot next white, ad nauseum, because the reason I can do this is a position is a board square. A position dot next white is also a board square. Next white's next white is also a board square. Its next white is also a board square. We can just kind of keep on going on and on and on. But why would you? Yeah, why would you?
Want to?
You wouldn't even want to, Kevin, would you?
No, but they can. I would.
They might. Yeah, I don't know. I think you should give them more credit.
Okay.
But that does also go into hard coding territory where don't do that.
Yeah, no hard coding.
Don't hard code.
Yeah,
It's more sad to see hard code because you can get away with it.
You might get away with it sometimes.
Not with me.
To be honest, sometimes you'll get away with hard coding. Just don't do it. Bad idea.
It's a really low chance, especially if you're my student. If you try, I read every line of your code. So
yeah, you'll get away with it.
I read every line of code too. It's hard to get past it.
You'll get away with it if Kevin's grading at 3 a.m. and you're the 19th student that he's grading, and you do a little thing. Maybe you'll get away then.
Yeah, maybe. That's like a low percentage still. It's a maybe. It's a big maybe.
Yeah, Kevin, I admire how awake and sharp you are at 3 a.m.
No, but I usually grade till 10 a.m. I start grading at like 2 a.m. I grade till 10 a.m. So Yes.
Those
Yes.
are grading the card out
So somebody's wondering, are the pieces of each player always going to be 7? Well, I think officially in the game they're 7, but that could change. That's why we have this constant up here called starting pieces equals 7. So you're supposed to use that. That way, if the starting pieces would change, we could just change it here, and it would, your code would not need to be updated.
Also, exit position.
Yeah, the
No.
exit position isn't an actual position. No, the exit position is not a position on the board. There will be a square on the board, which I'm going to show you. So here's an example. The exit variable inside a board square might contain white or it might contain black. These will be strings. But there will only be 2 board squares that are exit points. So what you're going to find is you're going to go to the exit point, and then if you're at the exit point and you roll 1, you just take your piece off the board. There's not an exit square in the game board at all. And of course, if you're like the square before the exit and you roll 2, then you just go off the board also. Ryan's wondering, would I store all the players' pieces in a list? That sounds like a really good idea. Any of the TAs want to disagree with me? Any of the TAs think we shouldn't put the stones in the list?
Option.
This is a good way to keep track of multiple things of the same thing.
Yeah. I think we should definitely we should recommend putting in a list. I think so. Any constants we need? Should it be in the game class or should it be in global scope? No, I would put my constants in the Royal Game of class. I mean, you can put it up here above it, but it doesn't really matter. But we already have one constant in the Royal Game of so why not just put the others there too? You can actually make constants inside functions if you want. Then they won't be accessible outside the function.
It's just a matter of scope. Outside of that, it doesn't.
Yeah, it's just a matter of scope. Let's see. Yeah, and just kind of to reinforce, of all the squares on the board, say there are like 20 squares. I think that on the original board there are 20 squares. Maybe you can't go to all of them, but 20 squares exist. So there will only be 2 of those 20 that are entrance squares. All the rest of them, they have this entrance and exit, variables, and they'll just be empty. 2 of them will have self.entrance, something in there. One of them will have white, and one of them will have black. Same goes for exit. And we shouldn't have to say this, but there will be no square on the board that's both an exit and entrance square. It's either one or the other, but most likely none. Because most of the squares aren't entrance or exit squares. Yeah, so I think that we've pretty much covered our bases here. So any of the TAs have anything to comment? Hi, Sammy, by the way.
Start early.
Yo.
Yeah, so hi, Sammy.
Yeah.
Start early. Do not wait till Friday to start. Extensions are not guaranteed.
Yeah.
They're super rare supposed to be. You guys already get locked out with like 3 plus extensions already. So
Yeah, that's
don't
another secret purpose of this video is we want to avoid having extensions. So if we provide you with a bunch of information, we're sort of hoping that maybe the extension won't happen this time. So yeah, definitely get started on your project as quickly as possible. If you already started on it, that's good. If you haven't started on it, start on it as soon as the stream ends, or if it's too late in the evening for you, wake up at 8 a.m. or earlier tomorrow morning and start it then. And hop in office hours. I think office hours starts at 9 a.m. tomorrow. And we realize office hours can be a bit frustrating. I think today, if you didn't join the queue before like 11 or something like that, you didn't get helped. And that's really unfortunate. And there will be more TAs available, say, on Friday, but unfortunately, this is just kind of the way it worked. I remember being in 202 last spring, and we had to deal with that also, and it's just kind of, unfortunately, the way it is. So, my recommendation, Project 2 is already going, but, Project 3 will be released before dreadfully long. Start on Project 3 right away. You'll probably have 2 or 3 weeks for that, and if you go to office hours the first day or so into the project, you're going to find you can get help pretty much right away. And I know, I've told you this, probably most of you won't do it, but I've given you fair warning. That's kind of all I can do.
I just want to say a piece real quick. Yes, real quick. Friday there is more TAs, yes, but there's also way more of you students.
Yeah.
So it kind of balances out, by the way. So don't count on Fridays. I work both. I work Thursday and Friday last shifts, and it's hectic.
Yes.
So
yes.
I have to
It's
jump in the
hectic.
house every once in a while. I don't think I've done that recently. I probably should.
What's your day, Brian?
Tuesdays and Wednesdays.
Okay, yeah. Yeah, I have both of my sessions on Fridays. Funnily enough, the first week or so of the semester, barely anybody came. That was back in the easy days, back when life was easy and nobody knew how to use if statements and loops. All you did was printing and getting input, and maybe some adding and subtracting.
Yeah, now it's like, especially for my days, I'm like the only TA on, so it can be.
Yeah. Somebody's saying can confirm I was in queue for 4 hours. Yeah, I'm sorry about that. There's not really anything we can do about that.
While we're on the office hours topic, please give specific descriptions of the issue. If I see something like Project 2 or homework something, I can't help or I can't really get directed to the issue without knowing what the issue is. I'm not the only TA to feel that way.
If you let us know, we go in with the idea of what you're looking for, instead of going in and taking 5 extra minutes or longer to figure out what the heck you need. So a detailed description of what you're going in for. It's like writing a cover letter. You don't go in and jabber about your life. You go in and tell them exactly what you're trying to accomplish, and then it will get you somewhere in life.
What happens if a student tells you, everything they want to do with their life, Kevin?
I would sit there, listen, and give my best
You know how to
opinion.
write a cover letter?
You're supposed to, but I don't know about that one.
Well, we definitely don't teach it in 201.
Definitely not.
Yeah. All right. Well, I think we've probably covered enough territory for one day. Yeah. Yeah, I think that it looks like we don't really have much left in the way of questions. So I think we're going to call it quits for today. Eric will eventually load this up to his YouTube channel. I'm going to encourage him to do it before too long. But, unfortunately no guarantees. So it might be tomorrow sometime, but hopefully he'll do it tonight yet. So that's all. Good luck, everybody. Hope you do very well in your project. I hope you learned a lot with this. I guess we'll find out and, see how many people go into office hours tomorrow. We can use that as a measure of our success. And if, you don't come to office hours tomorrow, we can feel really good about ourselves or something. Good luck, everybody.
Good luck.
That was super helpful coming in the last 5 minutes.
Yeah, we appreciated your presence, Sammy.
Your
I
presence.
bless you all
for
with my voice.
Yeah, well, a lot of the
Yes.
time you were muted, but at least we could see that you were there in the chat.
Your
Yeah.
presence had an aura that boosted the students' rate of absorption. We'll just go for that. I don't know.
Her presence was enough. That's the important part.
Those were individual words, but it was not a sentence.
Sentences escape me at this time of night.
Really? It's only
Yet you don't start
10:04.
grading,
Why would sentences
Yeah.
escape you, Kevin?
and yet you start
Because
grading
I'm
later.
so burned right. Yeah, I know. I know. It's how it be sometimes.
English
Why are we
is
still
hard.
streaming?
English is hard. Yeah, that's
Oh,
true.
we're still
English-
streaming.
Technically, I have it. All right, I'll kill the stream. Bye, everybody.
Okay, bye, kids.
Hi, everybody.
We're gonna make them sit here and listen to us argue for the next 10 minutes.
No.
A fair number will probably sit there.
Yeah.
Yeah, Sammy, I just ended the stream, and what you